Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook. We're going to be focusing this week on Richmond Municipal Council, and that's partly because the council is finally holding public meetings within the council chambers at the Richmond Municipal Building in Arishat. That hasn't necessarily been the case over the past 6 months due to COVID-19 and the resulting social distancing protocols. But with the swearing in of a new council last month, the municipal leaders have decided to take a few new directions to be able to bring the council proceedings to you, the viewer. One way of doing that is by live streaming the council meetings right here on Telile Community Television. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment or two. But as well, council wants to reinstate the public question period that was taken away by the previous council. Here's a few more details on that decision from the most recent meeting of Richmond Council's Committee of the Whole.
My thought process here was that we reopen a regular question period to allow the public to ask questions of us. You know, obviously with the pandemic, it's, you know, that logistically complicated potentially, but we did want to put that on the table, and I'd like to hear any kind of discussion on that, any thoughts?
As a resident, you know, attending these meetings the last couple of terms, I was never a fan of getting rid of question period. I ran my campaign on openness and transparency and more public input and consultation and engaging in our residents. So for me to have people here on a regular basis, and you see them at every meeting, if they have a question of council, they should have every right to ask that question and for us to answer it if we can at the time.
I'm glad you're asking to bring back question period. I think it's important. I think it's great to allow the people the time to speak. I believe we have to, I guess, proceed with caution, like you say, in this pandemic time. But again, maybe let everybody know that our emails are accessible. So if they do have a question that they don't think they can come in, they can definitely email any one of us that's on the website, and we can bring their question to council and possibly answer it for them.
I also support the return of question period to council. I think we want to be cautious with our time as well. We want to ensure that people are asking questions as opposed to using the forum as a opportunity to present a position, for lack of a better description. So I certainly support that. I definitely want to hear from residents of Richmond County, and as Councillor Digdon mentioned, you know, through more informal ways, not necessarily in council chambers, folks are welcome and encouraged to do that. But I think that it requires perhaps further discussion amongst the council in terms of what question period could look like when we are able to welcome the public back to chambers.
At this point then, are there any thoughts on what the parameters might look like for the return of question period?
One person can use up 15 minutes pretty fast. I know it's not fair, but we have to, I guess, kind of get to the point of the question and give the answers probably as quick as possible. Maybe instead of lingering on the question, just point for point. And if we don't know the answer right to the, like Mr. Sampson said, if we don't know the answer right to the bullet, then let's find out and get back to them. Because it's unfair for somebody who's traveled a long distance to wait 15 minutes and then question period be shut down. I think we need a little bit of leniency there.
I don't want to negatively impact people's ability to speak, but I also absolutely agree with Councillor Digdon. We need to respect the time of everyone. We should be able to fit in 3 or more questions in a 15-minute question period. So we have to figure out a way to make that be possible. And sometimes that's going to mean that we get back to people with their questions, with the answers to the questions, because perhaps we don't know those. If it's not something that's on the agenda in that evening, we probably are not, you know, fully up to speed on whatever it is.
My boundary line would be about a half an hour from here. So anybody, let's say, coming from my district would be traveling quite a distance. They could be well over an hour. So maybe having a bit of flexibility in the sense that if I had somebody, you know, coming from Framboise, for instance, with a question that I really wouldn't want to see them have to travel back home without being given the opportunity to do so.
When the recommendation from Committee of the Whole came to this week's regular council meeting, it was passed unanimously, reinstating a 15-minute public question period that can be extended at council's wishes should the situation warrant on a case-by-case basis. In the meantime, Council is communicating with my colleagues at Telile Community Television to see what can be done in terms of continuous coverage of Municipal Council meetings, both regular and Committee of the Whole, and whether that coverage can be done via live streaming in addition to simply recording the meetings and then playing them back. Here's some of the conversation that surrounded Richmond Council's Committee of the Whole discussion on Telile's role in broadcasting council meetings.
This suggestion and this idea is obviously going to be dependent on what happens with the pandemic situation. We're seeing our numbers on the rise. If it comes to a point where we can no longer meet in person, then we need to take that into account. And certainly it has been easy enough to stream Zoom meetings, which is great. But I think, the value of having Telile record has been, evident and certainly was missed when it was not present by many community members. But I think, while we're here in person, it would also be, I think, in the spirit of our transparency and accountability in those discussions that we had, potentially a good idea to investigate that as an option, not one to replace the other, but an addition to.
In my opinion, it provides a much better visual for the people at home. I don't know that it makes any difference whether it's broadcast tonight or tomorrow, only because I did get commentary from even the swearing in. People said, it was pretty dull. It was just focused on one part of the room, Whereas normally the council meetings, as I'm speaking right now, both of us will be shown, and if people from the other side of the room are speaking, they're shown. And I think there's a better quality from that.
If I would have known, according to Brent's description, that every time I talked the camera was on me, I probably wouldn't have talked so much tonight. So, but in saying that, since I'm already here, I agree. It's the people want to know, and for those who can't get out, and with the pandemic in place, everybody wants to know what's going on at council. So I believe it's in our best interest and in their best interest. I mean, all of our platform was to keep the county united and keep everybody informed, and we want their feedback as well. So, I'm okay with, honestly, I'm going to say it, I'm okay with screwing up on TV or on Telile or anything else. I'm fine with that. We're all going to make mistakes, and, we're all going to be held accountable. So let's put them out there and, roll the dice.
I fully support the idea of the live stream. I think I'd like more information before I would be prepared to vote on let's say a motion that's what we do. I think we need to, consult with our friends at Telile to find out, if we could have multiple cameras in a live type of event, or what. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise. So I guess I would say we should perhaps talk to the experts in terms of what that could look like. And of course, we need to consider budgetary constraints as well when we look at all of those pieces. So for me, I would love the idea in principle, and I would love to hear more about it.
I would recommend exactly what Councillor Melanie Sampson said. We would consult with Telile first to see where their opinions are at and what they feel is the best option for us. So I would have the consultation with Telile first. Yeah.
So it sounds like we'd like to get a little bit more information then. So I guess could we ask staff to consult with Telile to get some information on how that might be best done? Let's figure out what our options are, costs associated, and of course what resources would be required within the room as well for that kind of thing.
Now, as many of you know, we do have a brand new council in Richmond County, including a brand new warden and deputy warden. All 5 districts elected new councillors in October's municipal elections. To talk a little more about how these elections were carried out, we're going to hear from Richmond County's Chief Returning Officer, Clair Rankin. And he's going to tell you, via his remarks to Richmond County's most recent Committee of the Whole, how the election was carried out and what lessons were learned about holding a paper election during the time of a COVID-19 pandemic. Here is Clair Rankin to tell us more right now.
The election was like no other in the history of Richmond County and probably indeed the world. To hold an election during a pandemic added a new layer of preparation in order to ensure that both the voter and the election staff remained safe. With no new COVID cases coming out of Richmond County since the election, one could say that our part of the election planning was a success. but there were new protocols to follow. As you know, there was an additional staff member added at the door of every poll to sanitize the voters as they arrived. The gift of a golf pencil, which would be only used by each individual voter, was another procedure, and the in one door, out the other practice in each poll also kept social distancing protocols in place. Although it did upset some people because there is a old tradition that you have to leave the same door you come in, right? That people weren't used to that, some of them. Other venues from the past included breaking up the polls into different venues. For instance, there used to be 3 polls in Loosedale Lions Hall. We only put 2 in there this time. There was another in Lordways. There was 3 polls last time. We broke that up this time to allow fewer people in the halls. We also had to make distinct lines for voters where the polls did share a hall, and only allowing so many voters in the poll where social distancing could be maintained. We were very lucky both in the advance poll days and election day that we had good weather, because it could have been quite a different story if people had to stay out in the rain because they weren't allowed in to crowd in the hall. The county employed approximately 110 people during the election. These were deputy returning officers, polling clerks, constables, and rovers. The municipality is to be thanked for raising the pay of these people from the 2008 standards, which meant that people were paid an average of $15 an hour for their time served. And it's a long day. It's a 12-hour day for the staff. They have to arrive around 7:30 to set their polls up. And even though the polls close at 7, they have to stay and break open the boxes and count every ballot and make sure everything balances before they're allowed to leave, before anybody's allowed to leave the hall, the poll. There were horror stories from the federal election that some people had worked there that didn't get out until midnight because they couldn't align the ballots with the people that voted. So we were lucky that I think the latest one that we had was the advance polls, because we had quite a turnout at the advanced polls. We had over 500 in the 2 days in St. Peter's, and we had over 600 here in Arishat. So it was quite a start to a real positive election, I think. Well, I'm sure you guys would agree. And whereas the COVID pandemic ruled out door-to-door enumeration, the province came through and supplied the list from the 2017 provincial election. And while the benefit of having prepared lists eliminated the task of transferring the enumerators' lists into voters' lists, the use of these lists that were 3 years old did come with some discrepancies, as you all are aware. Richmond residents who had passed away since 2017 were on the list. Residents who had moved away since 2017 were on the list. And conversely, new residents to Richmond County had to be added in droves in order to be able to vote. Even one of the candidates found out that they weren't on the voters list. We added approximately 300 people to the voters list on election day, and almost the same number through you and your competitors' efforts out there going door to door or hearing from people who weren't on the list. Thus, the lists we have now are somewhat inflated, with the only additions being made during the election cycle, with few deletions taking place. So when I report on the voting percentages, please take this anomaly into consideration. Overall, there were 7,910 registered voters on election day in Richmond County, with 5,030 votes cast, for an overall participation rate of 64%. A very positive rate, and one that we should all be proud of in Richmond County. We had a returning officer Zoom meeting today with the provincial people, and Port Hawkesbury had the highest percentage of turnout in the province at 77%. Now, they had a hybrid election. You could vote online or you could vote in person. And they only had one poll at the Civic Center, lots of parking, big building, everybody knew where it was. So, and it's a town. It's a small, smaller than, they're not spread out from Point Tupper to Foreshue. So anyway, the individual districts in each individual results. District 1, we had 1,599 eligible voters with 1,089 votes cast for a participation rate of 68%. District 2, we had 1,265 voters, 853 votes cast for 67%. District 3, we had 1,628 eligible voters with 1,112 votes cast for 68%. District 4, 1779 eligible voters and 11,054 votes cast for 65%. And District 5, we had 1,583 eligible voters and 821 votes cast for a participation rate of 52%. That number is a little skewed in that there was one poll that had almost 400 voters eligible, but only 68 voters cast a ballot for a participation rate in that poll of 17%. So if they're removed from the rest of the additions, it goes up to 65%. So it's a bit of standout. In conclusion, and you're going to hear that again in 4 years, in conclusion, and then somebody goes on for hours and hours. Yeah. In conclusion, I noticed that the 10-year review of the electoral boundaries, as mandated by the Nova Scotia Utilities and Review Board, the URB, is due just past your 4-year term here. Your first 4-year term, I should say. If you have time to prepare for the review during this mandate, may I point out what I believe are 2 glaring errors in the district mapping. Number 1 is Thiebauville. It's home to only 4 residences, but they are in District 3. The line between Districts 3 and 4 should be moved slightly west. It has to be moved like 400 feet to include all these 4 homes. Even to vote, they were forced to drive into River Bourgeois, cross the 104, drive down the River Bourgeois, take number 4 all the way to Grand Anne's Hall to vote, and then all the way back home. Surely the longest commute any voter had in this election. The other one that is an anomaly, it stands out, is the people who live along Grand Grave Road and may wonder who drew the boundary line between Districts 4 and 5, as it's just a straight line on a piece of paper. That doesn't make any common sense. The boundary simply cuts the road in 2, whereas if you live in the first kilometer of the road, you're in District 4. As soon as you cross this imaginary line, you're in District 5. Now, imagine if the waste collector doesn't show up. The first people will call District 4 councillor and say, what happened? He's not here. And the rest of the road will call District 5 and say, hey, the waste guy didn't show up today. I mean, it really isn't following any sense at all. And Another example arose this fall, whereas the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal was mandated to clean the ditches in District 4, and that's what they did. They drove down the road, they cleaned the ditches, and when they got to District 5, they stopped, packed up, and went away. So it doesn't make any sense and the people there are really mad. Now the water stops at District 4 and spills over into District 5. So there's something else for you to consider looking at. And the URB does look at inconsistencies like this quite regularly and quite favorable if you can make the case for them. So in closing, I'd like to thank the staff here at the municipal office for their support and help through all of this, especially Don and Yvonne, Carla, Jason, Clint, Anna, and Christina. Also the election staff, who were the backbone of the entire electoral process, who, in the midst of a global healthcare pandemic and emergency, performed proficiently and friendly as we in Richmond County have been known to do well.
Every year at this time, Richmond Municipal Councillors prepare donations for the food banks that serve Richmond County residents. However, a year ago, there was some discrepancy over whether the formula for food bank donations was being handed out fairly. Well, after some more discussion on the issue, the new Richmond Municipal Council has decided to revamp the formula to make sure that all food banks in the municipality, including the new one that just opened in Budladek, are going to be treated fairly. Here's a look at that discussion on food banks right now.
Richmond County has in the past supported financially food banks in the county. Christmas is coming up. This tends to be the time of year where that action would take place. So I'd like to, open this for discussion to members of council. Your thoughts on this matter?
In the current budget that we're in now, council did allot $10,000 for food banks. Traditionally, we would split the food bank allocation amongst 5 food banks. Last year it was done by district, and each councillor took that $2,000 and split it amongst the food banks in their location, their district. So either way, you folks can do it either way. You can allocate the $10,000 because that's what's budgeted right now. and allocate it whichever way you choose.
Last year there was a discrepancy when it came to your area, Brent. As the food bank, there was a food bank that had no address associated to it, so it wasn't looked at as being an option for funding, correct?
There were 5 food banks, and there were 5 districts, but 2 food banks were in one district, and 1 food bank was in 2 districts. So, District 1 and 2, Almadam has 1 food bank. District 5 has 2 food banks. So that was basically the dilemma.
Yeah, last year, I guess how it played out from what I viewed on the meetings and so on. The money for District 1 and 2 went to the food bank in Almadam, and District 3, the money went there, and District 4, the money went to the one in St. Peter's. And anyway, District 5 ended up splitting the $2,000 between the 2 of them. I think the biggest issue with that was it probably felt like it was kind of last minute, and it wasn't necessarily what had been done in the past. Mind you, I understand obviously the food bank in Almadam is covering a greater number of people, and so it's something that's got to be taken into consideration. The thought I had, but it's a big ask of everybody, I guess, was that possibly if each districts 1 through 4 would be able to forego 250 of the 2,000, it would allow for my district to end up getting 1,500 to Lordways and 1,500 to Budladek, as opposed to 1,000 each, and it would make a great impact there, I think, without a huge cut to the other districts. However, I know nobody likes taking a cut. I understand that, and I'm open to discussion on that.
Do we have any numbers, I guess, to litigate or figure out how many people use each food bank?
Well, we did get some numbers from the food banks. I don't recall what those numbers actually were. However, I don't think they based their decision on the number of people that were going to the food banks, because they made their decision on district.
I actually spoke to the food bank coordinator in my district, and so based on the conversation that I had with her, I would be agreeable to District 5 if his proposal that we all share to 250. That was something that she mentioned, that we've been very lucky in our district to not have a lot of people who require the services of the food bank. I would say at this late date, I, similar to Deputy Warden Digdon, would like to find out more from all of the food banks, similar information, how much money they have already put aside, how many people they serve on a regular basis. I also wanted to touch out to other areas in my own district that, from what I understand, don't have a food bank, but maybe they should, and where they're served. So I think for today we need to make a decision that perhaps is not how we would do it going forward, but that we make a commitment to gather more information so that next year at this time, when we're making a similar decision, we can use some of that information.
I'm definitely okay with giving money over to the other district. It just bothers me that we're cutting costs when it comes to a food bank. Obviously, the people who have to go to that food bank are in dire straits, and the County of Richmond, when I knocked on everybody's door, was here for the benefit of the people. I don't know if the budget allows it. I know, obviously, it's been almost set in stone, but there must be some leeway that we can, I don't know, I guess check with our CEO or our CFO to see if we can go back to, I guess, if it was a $2,000 limit per food bank, then I see no need why we can't go, or if we haven't been there, then I see no need why we can't go to a $2,000 limit per food bank, if that's an option available. If not, then I have no problem supporting Brent's recommendation as well. I just feel that we're taking food from people who actually are looking for food, and I have a problem with that.
Maybe if it is possible for us to keep this in the back of our minds and take this into consideration, especially for the budget year next year. We're kind of walking into a situation where things were set up prior to us being here. So I was just looking at it to try and make the best of the situation at this point. But as well as what Councillor Sampson said, the more information we have, the better we can do going forward, likely.
To Deputy Warden Digdon's point about making cuts, especially during a time of pandemic, I guess the concern that I've heard expressed is that if we don't make a recommendation this evening, that we will not have the time available to us before Christmas to execute any decision. So that's the unfortunate situation that we are in, and at the same time, maybe there's some more thinking that we need to be doing on this, to your point, Deputy Warden.
I ran my campaign on what's good for my district is good for Richmond County, and what's good for Richmond County is good for all districts. So I would have no problem, Brent, sharing my 250 and making sure that everybody's taken care of, right? So I'd have no problem with that.
So I also will definitely support Brent's intent to balance it throughout. I would like to, I guess have it noted or be noted that is one thing that we definitely work on, is to increase the budget or increase the amount that's going to the food banks.
So I would move that the funds, that the $10,000 budget for food bank be distributed as follows. Districts 1 through 4, $1,750 each, and District 5, $3,000. Someone should check my math.
That's right.
District 3 Councillor Melody Sampson's math was indeed correct, and those figures were recently passed at the most recent meeting of Richmond Municipal Council, ensuring that all 5 food banks serving Richmond County residents will receive equal funding this year. Now, amidst all the confusion of trying to follow social distancing protocols during this time of COVID-19, there is some good news for young athletes and for families of young athletes. That good news is that the Richmond Arena is now reopened for rentals and for sports use. To track how we got here and how the arena reopening process took place, let's look at some recent activity and discussion at the Richmond County Committee of the Whole meeting in Arishat.
The preliminary decision to postpone the arena opening for 1 month was agreed to by the former council, and we set our sights on a November 1st opening. When the staff arrived at the arena to begin the process, they discovered that there was some mold that had developed on the stands approximately 10 feet off of the ground surface. So the arena staff were already in there preparing the ice and actually making ice. So we then engaged a firm to do testing on the mold, just to make sure that it was, what it was, whether or not it was safe or unsafe, and it came back that it was not a dangerous mold, but it would irritate anyone who had any kind of breathing issue. We proceeded to solicit quotes to get the work done, and it was completed. Of course, that all takes time, so it pushed the opening of the arena further back, basically. And we did get the results, and the main arena is all clear. However, there were 2 areas that were still beyond the limits. One was a bathroom area, which we have cordoned off, and the other area is the Zamboni room, which we also have indicated to the staff that they wear their PPE to conduct their daily job duties in that area. They've just cordoned off that area. There are a couple of bathroom areas that are available, so there definitely will be bathroom facilities available. We currently are in the process of getting the business that did the original cleaning back in to clean the bathrooms and the Zamboni room. And it's my understanding that it's a very simple process, and that there will not be a requirement to do any testing beyond that point. And once that's done, then we'll be completely open.
I was looking through the minutes of the last council, and it was upon their recommendation that that the arena be, I guess, the opening of the arena be set by staff. So I guess the only concern I would have, or the question I would have, would be, I guess, what led to the fact that the arena was full of mold, and why did it take us so long to find out? Was the arena, I guess, shut down throughout the whole summer, or is there provisions in place that this doesn't happen again?
Well, due to COVID, we did have programming in the arena in the past, and of course that was shut down because of COVID. So I guess had we known that mold would have developed because we were not frequenting the arena, then we would certainly have checked it. However, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we didn't have it then. So it happened once. I can assure you it won't happen again.
Do we have a cost of what this, or an expense of what this is going to cost us? And number two is, do we have an estimate of the loss of revenue by not opening on time of, I guess, what we lost?
We don't have the costs yet because we haven't been invoiced. That's to answer your first question. The second question, as you all know, the arena is not a revenue. Is not a profit builder. It's a liability. So, in fact, by not opening on October 1st, it probably cost us less money to get to this point right now.
The president of Cape Breton University paid a visit to Richmond Municipal Council earlier this month during its Committee of the Whole meeting. David Dingwall is familiar to many of our viewers because of his 17 years as Member of Parliament for the former riding of Cape Breton East Richmond, the last 4 years of those spent in the cabinet of Liberal Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. As the president of CBU, Dingwall told Richmond Council about many of the programs that are available at the university, but he also painted an interesting picture about population decline and the struggles that various parts of Cape Breton have faced over the past half-century. Let's take a listen to that presentation by Dingwall right now.
I'd like to introduce my colleagues that are with me from the Department of Development is Steve Horn. And to my left is the Vice President of Finance at Cape Breton University, who has a long and distinguished career. As a young man, he did the audit here at Richmond County. So I say to the Chief Administrative Officer, if there's any problems, he's the guy to blame. So thank you very much. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can, and no doubt you will have the big stick, and you will ask me to refrain. But on October the 23rd, 2020, the Board of Governors at Cape Breton University passed a unanimous resolution in support of the Center for Discovery and Innovation. Do we have the...
It's coming up.
It's coming up. There it is. Very slow. There it is. This project is in total alignment with our strategic plan that we work very diligently on, as well as our research plan and our academic plan. This is a strategic decision for the university. It's a decision which will engage our customers, which is essentially students, local students, domestic students from across Canada, and indeed international students. This new facility will strengthen the core of the offerings at Cape Breton University, and it will exhilarate the growth in the municipalities throughout the island of Cape Breton. I think the need for this Center for Discovery and Innovation, in my estimation, is overwhelming. The facility is, the old facility is 53,000 square feet. It's approximately 50 years old. It's full of asbestos. I don't want to scare you, but students still enter the building because we adhered to many, many, many protocols in terms of protecting them from asbestos. And the faculty and the staff realized that with this kind of antiquated facility, it's very difficult in terms of the modernization of what students wish to have going forward. So the question I have is, what value would a new Center for Discovery and Innovation bring to the university and bring to the community? This facility would bring a lot of benefits to the university and to the community. But before I talk about that, let's talk about the present. We've created 169 new jobs at Cape Breton University with the influx of international students. We pay in excess of $11.2 million in taxes to the provincial government. We provide $165 million in economic activity here in Cape Breton. There are many facilities in the urban parts of Cape Breton who have benefited. In fact, there are many businesses in Richmond County and throughout the other counties who have benefited from international students. During the summer months before COVID, last year, we distributed some 165 students to various operators throughout the counties here in Cape Breton. The Louisburg Seafoods is one that comes to mind. Premium Seafoods, not the one that bought Clearwater, but the other one. And of course, that has generated some substantial economic revenue here in Cape Breton. But there's a bigger issue that I need to share with you. And that is the issue of learning this technology. I want to talk about this population. For 43 years, from 1971 to 2014, the population growth in Canada was the following. British Columbia, 107%, doubled. Alberta, 147%. Ontario, 74%. Quebec, 34%. PEI, 29%. And Nova Scotia, 18.2%. If we're going to grow as an island, the four counties have to have some measure of population growth. We can't point the finger at others and say, well, you know, it's your fault. It's our fault. We need to work collectively together in terms of trying to grow the population here in Cape Breton. The 18.2% over a 43-year period in Nova Scotia is rather staggering. If you looked at the census districts in the province of Nova Scotia, there's 18. Only 2 of them had a growth. One was Halifax, I think it was 2.1. The second one was either the Annapolis Valley or Kings, which was 0.1. All other municipal units across the province saw a decrease. The 4 counties here in Cape Breton, Richmond County being one, Inverness, Victoria, and Cape Breton Regional Municipality, all decreased substantially. That needs to be of great concern to all of us. So, in my preparation for coming here and speaking to other groups, we did a little bit of homework. The CBRM had done some extensive research into the population, which I think you might want to take a look at. You probably have your own studies. But it showed that the 4 municipalities in Cape Breton were on a massive decline. It's not me, it's the studies. A massive decline. And that's very troubling. You're not going to have the schools, you're not going to have the services, the taxes are going to go up, and business will flee because services are not here. A substantial thing for us to give consideration to. As a result, I went to PEI. I met with the former Premier of the province of PEI, Wade McLaughlin, who, a very bright man, likes to tell you that too. And I came with my questions and knew what the answers were going to be, but I had to ask him. I said, Premier, no, call me Wade, which was kind of nice as we drank coffee. I said, What did you do differently in PEI that we didn't do in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland? He said, we embarked upon a population strategy. And that population strategy had 3 buckets. One was domestic migration, people from around the country coming back home. The second one was immigration. The third one was international students and the retention of international students. So what were the results in PEI versus that of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland? In PEI, they increased their population by 13,500. Nova Scotia continued to decline, with the exception of those 2 census districts. New Brunswick was declining and Newfoundland was declining. That is a substantial piece of growth in the province of Prince Edward Island. And he also said, look, you know, in Prince Edward Island, the GDP was the best in the country. The worst in the country was Nova Scotia. I think New Brunswick was the second worst and Newfoundland was the third. So there was a real benefit in terms of a population strategy. You now see in 2020, New Brunswick is pursuing that. Nova Scotia is on that way, although they haven't announced it officially, but they're moving in that direction. And Newfoundland has announced that as well, that they're moving towards a population strategy. So we believe that to be very significant for our municipal units. What will be required, Madam Chair, is for the university and yourselves and other municipal units to work more cooperatively and collaboratively as we try to have more people reside in our communities. It's not going to be easy, but I think we need to put our shoulder to the wheel and say, hey, what are some of the best practices that we can adopt for the purposes of our population growth? Now, here's what's happened in the CBRM. Since 1961, for over close to 50 years, the CBRM has never had a population below 100,000. It is now below 100,000 and dropping like a rock if you look at this particular graph. We changed it in 2019. Why? The university had 3,200 students in 2018. In 2019, we went to 6,050. We attract international students from over 56 different countries around the world. And with a worldwide COVID pandemic, this year we have online 5,000 students. 75% of the international students who come to this island want to stay. We think that's significant, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities. So why would they want to come to Cape Breton? What are some of the strategic advantages that we have on the island that perhaps others don't have? Well, you have it in spades in Richmond County, which I represented it for many years in the Parliament of Canada. But you are a welcoming community. That is a significant strategic advantage. Do not underplay it. Just as Inverness, Victoria, and the CBRM. We're also #1 island in North America. But we don't talk about it. We let some tourist operators talk about it, but we never talk about it. Must be embarrassed. Can't talk about that. That's good news. My dear friend, the former governor of Michigan, Jim Blanchard, and I won't use the language because I think we're on television, but he did tell me, he said, Dingwall, you're crazy. Could you imagine if we had an island in Michigan, what we would do with that? Not only from a tourism point of view, but also through an economic development point of view. Significant. Third strategic advantage is our environment. The pristine nature of the Bredor Lakes, which is the geographical center of Cape Breton Island. People from all over the world Google that on a regular basis, particularly when they reference CBU and other parts of Cape Breton. We at CBU, unlike others, we have a very, very high quality, competitively priced educational product. Mount St. Vincent, I think, has about a $60 or $75 lower than we are. Newfoundland is a little bit cheaper because the state pays for it all. But we're a pretty competitive priced product in terms of an educational degree. Another thing that you have in Richmond County, elsewhere in Cape Breton as well, that we never want to talk about, is a relatively low crime rate. And you may say, well, what significance does that have? Well, let me tell you. When you're in the capitals of India, in China, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Europe, the hand goes up. And it's usually women who ask the question. Sir, you made a very nice presentation, but may I ask you a question? Yes, please. Is it safe in Cape Breton? Will my daughter be okay? Will she be open to physical abuse? Most of us don't think of that. But when you're in a far away land, that happens. It's a serious strategic advantage for the island to be promoting as far as the university is concerned. We have at the university a capacity to develop partnerships. We have over 200 different MOUs and arrangements around the world. We have a partnership with the Canadian Coast Guard. We have a partnership with the Nova Scotia Community College, dozens of nonprofit organizations, as well as many, many, many private sector operations. And finally, and I could give you more strategic advantages, but let me close with this one. And I thank the elected representatives in Nova Scotia for this one. I think it's important for them to get the credit when the credit is due. But you have to admit, in Richmond County, that one of the safest places in the Western world with COVID-19 is in Cape Breton. And if you don't think that I'm going to promote that in my international travels, which you should be promoting as well, because people can relocate back here, they can work from here, conduct their businesses, and be in a safe, healthy environment as we go forward. That is very significant. Now, I think my time is just about up. There may be a few questions, but just to repeat. Number one is that there is a need for this new facility. It is important to the university and the offerings that you give to students. The second advantage is there's a community-wide advantage. I don't know of any other business in Cape Breton that created 169 jobs. I don't know any other business that has a $165 million footprint economically each and every year in Cape Breton. And on the population, I want you to read this as part of my closing remarks. And with your permission, I'll read it out loud. The latest Stats Canada numbers show the university students had a significant impact, most notably in the CBRM. There was an increase of 2,249 in net non-permanent residents in the CBRM, and just to put that into context, the increase in Halifax was 1,481. So it's a very large jump. That's how much this means to the overall population in Cape Breton. That's actually pushing the population up. I think the task for us is to work with you, your committees, other committees, on domestic migration, on international immigration and international students that come to Cape Breton.
And just before we wrap things up here on Telile 24/7 this week, we're going to revisit a story that has popped up a few times during 2020. That's the story of who will provide fire service protection to the community of Point Tupper, and whether Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury could come to an agreement on that in the future. Well, as it turns out, that issue did come back to the council table during this month's Committee of the Whole meeting. It came back in the form of discussion on an independent consultant's report that was carried out in 2019 and 2020 for Richmond County concerning fire service protection across the county, not just in Point Tupper. However, it could wind up connecting to the issue of Point Tupper in the coming weeks and months, so let's revisit that discussion at Richmond County's council chambers right now.
I just wanted to basically open the conversation. So we do have a fire services committee, and so in recognition that we have a report that we need to be briefed through, that we have a new emergency services coordinator. I guess I would just like to get it on our schedule, that we would be briefed on that by the emergency services coordinator, and that we would just begin to think about what our options look like in terms of fire service, because if we have a contract, from what I understand, and not to discuss contractual issues, of course, but with Louisdale Fire Department, that, from what I understand, expires at the end of March. So we want to make sure we do some pre-planning in terms of where do we go, not even necessarily just about the Point Tupper fire services, but fire services, I think, in general.
Everybody's been getting a call from the town of Port Hawkesbury, and, you know, just to let them know that we sit around this table tonight being our first night. So again, just to reiterate what Melanie said, I think it is important that we get the figures and facts and budgets and the information in front of us before we come to any sort of agreement or disagreement. So yeah, I think it's important that we look at that probably as soon as possible. That should be, and it might be important to make a motion to get the the facts on the fire services brought up as soon as possible, so that we can look at it.
Well, you're suggesting just a request potentially for a staff report.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. If we could make a note of that, that would be helpful.
Certainly, maybe a report from staff would do the trick, at least to get the ball rolling for sure.
And that wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you've learned even a little bit about how things are going in Richmond County and in the Strait area over the last little while. If you have any ideas or suggestions for future shows, you can reach us in several ways. You can contact me directly. My number is 902-625-8863. And you can also reach me by email. The address is adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile directly. The station phone number is 902-226-1928. And you can reach Telile by email. Use the address info@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile Community Television on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you go to Telile's YouTube channel, you'll not only see every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one, but you can also see individual interviews and stories from the different shows, and a whole lot of programming that Telile has been putting together over the past year, everything from music to literature to general discussion about life in Richmond County. And we hope you'll enjoy it by visiting Telile's YouTube channel. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you for joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon with a brand new episode of Telile 24/7. We'll talk to you then.